Hey, what's up everybody? It's Lids, and we're back for some more Gwent, and today we're playing more of the Order in All Things seasonal event, which is an alternate game mode in which at the start of the match, all of our cards get ordered with the highest provision cost cards at the top. That means that we can guarantee we'll always get our best cards, opening up some ambitious combos. So let's go take a look at the deck. So today we'll be playing a Nilfgaard Enslave Cultist deck because we can guarantee that we will get all of the cards to set up our Cultist combo. And what we are trying to do is using the Imperial Practitioner and creating as many copies of this as possible, setting this up so that when we use its order ability, we can create a bunch of copies of our Cultist scenario, the Eternal Eclipse, to put at the top of our deck so that in round 2 and round 3 we draw into all those copies, and then we can spam scenario after scenario and give ourselves an incredibly powerful round or two. So the way we make that happen is by starting off with Operator first to get an Imperial Practitioner both on our side of the board and our opponent's side of the board. Then you play the Imperial Practitioners directly from your hand as well, and those will start in your hand, guaranteed, once you've done a quick mulligan of Vilgefortz Renegade. We'll talk more about him in just a second. But then once you've gotten the Imperial Practitioners on the board, then you use Braathens, and with Braathens, because we also have the Duchess's Informant in our starting deck, you can create a copy of that, and because with Operator, we put one of the Imperial Practitioners on our opponent's side of the board, we have a Practitioner that we can create a copy of with the Duchess's Informants that we get from Braathens. So Braathens into Duchess's Informants into Imperial Practitioner. Then you can play the Duchess's Informants directly from your hand. Those will also be in your hand to start things off, and so that means even more Practitioners and even more procs for the Assimilate on the Practitioners and on Braathens as well, which is going to give you a decent amount of points as well. Once you've set up all of your Practitioners from doing all of that, you can, if you'd like to, use your Enslave Leader ability, because we have a bunch of low-value tactic cards that we're never going to see in our deck because they're hanging out at the bottom, and they're guaranteed to be at the bottom where we're never going to draw into them in this event. So it means we have Enslave 6 in this case, which is, of course, unless our opponent does a bunch of Assimilate triggers, going to be enough to steal back that Practitioner that we put on our opponent's side of the board at the beginning of the round. So you can do that, and then once you've done that, you should have about 6, possibly even as many as 7 if you use Enslave on the Practitioner. Then you use Oneiromancy in order to get Vilgefortz Renegade, which does start in your hand because it is a high provision cost card, but as I was saying, you actually mulligan this at the beginning of the match, and then you just use the Oneiro to get in. You'll obviously get the echoed copy of Oneiro in the later round as well. So use Vilgefortz to then put the Eternal Eclipse in your opponent's graveyard and steal whatever they happen to have in their graveyard. Once you've done that, immediately click on all the order abilities on your Practitioners. That's how you're going to get the 5, 6, possibly even as many as 7 of the scenarios at the top of your deck. So you'll draw into those in round 2 and round 3, and it should be just enough to draw into only those in the next rounds, or Oneiromancy as well. And so that means in round 2, you can then spam scenarios, and then the really nice thing in this event is that you're guaranteed to start with your gold cultist in your hand, so you will always have the ability to use things like Prophet and also Master of Ceremonies to make sure that you can trigger those scenarios. Obviously, that's worth a lot of points in the round in which you play them, which could be round 2 or potentially round 3, but as I was saying, you'll draw into more scenarios in round 3, so maybe you wait until round 3 to do this, assuming you won round 1. The other thing, though, is if you do this in round 2, then the infusions that you get are very valuable from a carryover standpoint as well, because since you have all the scenarios, those infusions stack, and it means that every time you play a cultist, any of your existing cultist units are going to get a huge boost whenever you do that, and that number scales if you play a bronze cultist, and because the last chapter of the scenario gives you a bunch of bronze cultists with the Deacons, that is a way to give yourself boatloads of points, definitely enough to win a round handily. If you don't have anything in your opponent's graveyard in round 1, when you're trying to use the swap with Vilgefortz Renegade, that is potentially one issue. We don't have a lot of damage in this deck, so one way you can help make that happen is that you have Ceremonial Dagger on blue coin, so you can use this to either go after one of your opponent's weaker cards and hopefully put something in your opponent's graveyard if they aren't playing a special card or something like that that's going to go in there already. Or what you could do is the other potential issue you could run into is if your opponent has a defender and uses that to block the Imperial Practitioner that you want to create all those copies of with all your Duchess's Informants. Use the Ceremonial Dagger on their defender and lower it down so that it becomes low enough to use Enslave on it, steal their defender, and then suddenly you have access to that Practitioner, and you can create the copies of it in round 1, and no issues there. Once you've done that, as I said, you should draw into all of your scenarios in round 2 and round 3. Spam the gold cultists that you're guaranteed to have, or if you ended up mulliganing one of them, or 2 of them even, you can use things like Oneiro and Royal Decree to tutor them out, or if you still have those and you don't need them to get your gold cultists, you can use them to guarantee that you get more of the bronze cultists, like the Deacons in our starting deck and Initiates in our starting deck, because as we were saying, that is the best way to maximize the amount of boosts you get once you've done the infusions on your existing cultists from all those scenarios. So that's what it's all about, is spamming as many copies of the scenario as possible, and as I said, that is worth a ridiculous amount of points, so let's go see it in action. Alright, so going up against Scoia'tael here, and we'll go first. And of course, we have all of our best cards in our starting hand, but we actually will mulligan Vilgefortz, because we'll get him with Oneiro, and we'll also mulligan out the Prophet, because we don't need that in round 1, and we can later get him if we need to with our other tutor, Royal Decree. So we'll start off with the Operator here, and use that to put Practitioner on our side of the board and our opponent's side of the board. Both of those Practitioners actually relevant here. They'll go with Frexinate, and that is a powerful card, one that is probably their win condition here for round 1, so we could even consider using our leader ability on that. Normally, you'd like to use it on a Practitioner. It gives us one more way to have a Practitioner on our board, but we have a little bit of flexibility there, because we don't need the maximum number of Practitioners. We can still get 5 or 6 even without using Imposter on that Practitioner, which is probably still enough, so I think we will go Enslave here on Frexinate, because that should make it much easier for us to win round 1 here, which we technically don't always need to do with this deck, but it is a nice luxury to have, of course. So we'll go Helmet Ride instead. And now it is us playing the Practitioners directly from our hand. That's what we'll do on our next turn as well. We're going to go 5 into some control here with Nature's Rebuke. And with that, remove a Practitioner. Okay, so as I said, we don't need every single Practitioner. Just looking at about 5 or so is sort of the magic number. And so getting 1 removed is probably still fine. Now we go Braathens. And with that, get a Duchess's Informants, and that's why we wanted the Practitioner on our opponent's side of the board, so we can create a copy of it with Braathens here. So that means we're up to 3. Now our opponent goes Francesca. Now that could be a little bit dangerous, depending on what they're trying to set up with that. Now we can go with our Duchess's Informants directly from our hand, and with that, once again, target that Practitioner, create another copy on our side of the board here. So that's 4, and now, of course, we are proccing the Assimilates as well, and that is making it harder for our opponent to answer the Practitioners. Our stratagem here, we can either use to destroy one of our opponent's units to make sure they have something in their graveyard, because we do need that to be the case when we play Vilgefortz, but since they've played some specials, that's not an issue here, so we can just go after one of their engines. We can actually activate Frexinate here, so why not? Then we'll go our last Duchess's Informants. And so with this, of course, once again, we'll be looking to create another of the Imperial Practitioners. So that puts us up to 5. And as I said, that is just about your target number here. Of course, you can go up to 6 or possibly even 7. 7 is actually a little bit overkill in most cases, though. If you get a little bit less, it's still workable, but not ideal. Now we go Oneiro to get Vilgefortz Renegade here. And with him, we take, Frogmaning Season is actually not a bad card. And then we put our scenario in their graveyard. Then if we click on the Practitioners, that will give us a copy of our scenario at the top of our deck. So for every Practitioner, that is a copy of our scenario at the top of our deck. So since we have 5 of them, that means 5 scenarios. Could have had a 6 if we used Enslave on that other Practitioner. But as we were saying, seemed like stealing Frexinate was a little bit better. That way we could be much more comfortable about winning round 1. And so now we'll draw into our scenarios going into round 2 and round 3. Oh, and that's Oneiro. They'll go Shaping Nature. And get a decent amount of points from that. Yeah, because this is actually what they're going to get Francesca to create a second copy of. So that's quite good. And they have taken the lead, but of course we have several Assimilate units on the board, and we did steal Frogmaning Season from their graveyard, and that's pretty valuable. So I think we still go for this, and that's probably enough to catch them, right? Might as well throw that on Frexinate and our weakest Practitioner. And when all the boosts kick in here, yes, we have passed them. And so they will pass, and we'll win round 1. So that's great. And as I was saying, we'll draw into our Eternal Eclipses here and the echoed copy of Oneiro. And then we should have our 3 other copies of our Eternal Eclipse at the top of our deck that we'll draw into in round 3. So we could try to push 2-0 here. It's not completely out of the question, but we did play 1 more card than our opponent in round 1, and we're going to draw into more scenarios in the next round. So it probably still makes the most sense for us to pass here. And they'll go with that Oneiro that they actually created a copy of with the Practitioner that we left on their side of the board. Now, it's not a huge deal. They're just going to use it to get an Abandoned Girl throwaway here. And here are the Eternal Eclipses that we've drawn into now. That's all of them. So we'll use all of those. Then we'll use 1 gold cultist from our hand, 1 of our tutors to get a second one, and then our last tutor we can use to get bronze cultist as well. And I imagine they'll be throwing out all of their big Symbiosis engines here, so, of course, Ethne is quite powerful, as is Aquin. So this will be an interesting matchup here, but of course, that's just 2 big engines, whereas we have 4 more scenarios here. And that will add up quickly because they do stack quite well. Deliberately not going to use this Initiate Order ability, at least not yet here. It is actually a little bit of a trap, a little bit of a trick of sorts, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. I'll maybe even show you why that is, but they'll go with Hamadryad. That's another decent engine for them. But we're just going to spam these scenarios. They'll go with a Guardian. Okay, a little bit of damage. They might be able to set up some removal on one of our initiates here, but we'll just go for, once again, another scenario. If you do anticipate you're going to use the order abilities on one of your opponent's cards, then you might want to try to play your scenarios on the row that is not the one opposite the card you're going to target. That way you have room to create more copies of them. You'll see why in just a second, because on this turn, we can use these order abilities, and we'll get rid of that Naiad Fledgling. Now, I think in most cases this is actually not a very good idea, and you'll see why in a second here. It's not terrible, but it does have the potential to backfire on you a bit. What we're actually going to do here, though, is before we play our last scenario, we're going to go with Oneiro into the Prophet, because otherwise his Adrenaline 2 is going to kick in, and that's not going to activate. He's going to get shut down. So it's a little unfortunate, the timing there. It does mean that we're going to not get to trigger both chapters of our last scenario, but so be it. Now, here is all the damage, and because we use several infusions on the fledglings, that means we get a copy of the fledgling for each time we infused it, and so that floods our rows quite quickly here, and that is actually, it's not terrible, because those are decent point value cards, yes, but they are probably not as valuable as the cards that we are going to play later on, and so we are probably going to run out of board space, and we would have preferred not to have used the fledgling. So, again, you could do it, but I actually think it is a little bit suboptimal to go that route, and you'll see why a little bit later on. So there's our last scenario. We do, of course, still have 1 more of the Gold Cultist, which we'll use to trigger the last chapter of most of our scenarios and the first chapter of the scenario that we just played. So we can either do that with Master of Ceremonies here, and I suppose we might as well use this Initiate Order ability here. Not going to have enough damage to destroy that card there, so it's just a little bit of damage. Or we could go and tutor out one of our Bronze Cultists here. I think we might actually prefer to do that, because once we play Master of Ceremonies, we're going to trigger that last chapter of most of our scenarios and clog our side of the board completely with Eternal Eclipse Deacons, and then we're just not going to have room to play our last card, and so in the interest of truly having last say, we'll go for a Bronze Initiate here. And of course, that will give us a bunch of boosts on all of our cultists. They'll go Call the Forest into Herald Gord, which should be a decent point slam. Gives them a somewhat sizable lead here, but of course we are saving our big finisher here. Might as well give ourselves a little bit more damage, but now when we play the Master of Ceremonies, we'll give ourselves tons of boosts on all of our other cultists. And we will get a bunch of Deacons as well. Now, this is what I was referring to before. We're going to run out of space here. We aren't going to be able to play all these Deacons because we got all those fledglings clogging up our range row, and these Deacons are more valuable than the fledglings because, as we're about to see, the boosts add up really quickly, and every time we play a bronze cultist, those numbers go up. So we would have preferred to play these deacons rather than flood our rows with those fledglings, but should still be more than enough. Might have gotten several more 100 with those deacons, but either way, we'll still take the win. All right, so going up against Skellige here, and they'll go first. And of course, we have all of our best cards in our starting hand here, but we'll mulligan Vilgefortz and use a tutor to get him. This is an older version of the deck that did not have Royal Decree, so we will not mulligan out one of our gold cultists because we don't have one of the tutors to get that. So in this case, we'll just hold on to both of our gold cultists and wait to play them until we break out our scenarios in the later rounds. And they use Cerus here, and that makes it immediately obvious what their entire plan is. They're going to create as many of those Drummond warriors as they can, and then use Lippy to replay Cerus and create even more copies of them to summon out in round 3 when they replay Cerus. It's a strong deck, so this will be a tough matchup. Heatwave O on our Practitioner is very unfortunate. That is going to make it much harder for us to create additional copies. Makes Braathens and the Duchess's Informants much, much less significant for us, so that does hurt quite a bit. Probably means we're just looking at playing the Practitioners directly from our hand here, and that's going to cap us out at 3 Practitioners and therefore 3 copies of our scenario at the top of our deck, so definitely not as much of a high-end potential in this case here. They've done a good job shutting down what would have been a great source of our setup, but we will proceed here and see if we can still make this happen. I'm thinking we shut down Cerus because she is crucial to their round 3 strategy. Except they can take her back with Vigo's muzzle. Wow, okay, well, I mean, they have their win condition and they are committed to it. And so, like I was saying, I think 3 Practitioners is all we're going to get here, so might as well break out Vilgefortz now. And with him, we could steal either Heatwave or Vigo's muzzle, really. Either one could be a way to shut down Cerus, so we'll take one of those and, of course, put our scenario into their graveyard and then create copies of that at the top of our deck using the Practitioners. So only 3 scenarios here again means much lower high-end potential here. So it's going to be a little bit trickier to pull this one off. They're going to go Squirrel, and that gets rid of our Oneiro, but that's actually kind of intriguing. I think we'll Heatwave Cerus just to get rid of her altogether, because again, that is the most important card they want to bring back using Lippy in round 3, because that means they can create an extra copy of those Drummond Warriors. I assume this is probably going to be discard package. Yep, that it is. But now that they have some bronze units on the board here, we have some targets we can use with Braathens and the Duchess's Informants, and I'm, in particular, eyeing that Squirrel, because if we create a copy of that, they have some pretty valuable cards in their graveyard that they are, of course, trying to recycle using Lippy, and, well, we can start with Oneiro. And they're going to destroy those Duchess's Informants, because maybe they're concerned about us using a coup or something like that, but that's going to add more low-value cards into their graveyard, which is bad news for them, because, of course, they're going to be recycling their graveyard back into their deck with Lippy. And, I mean, at this point, probably that still should have been a Squirrel and try to remove one other high-value card from their graveyard, but so be it. They are still concerned about destroying those Informants. Erendite. That's pretty valuable. And I'm thinking that's going to be what we target with another Informant into another Squirrel to banish another card from their graveyard. They're still holding on to the lead here, so I'm thinking we might let them win round 1, because we don't want to be playing either of our cultists in this round. They did not want to play Morkvarg from their hand, though. So, alright, I suppose we'll settle for this in round 1. So, they have slowed our setup. We've slowed their setup as well, though. This will be interesting in round 2 and round 3. And so we have our 3 scenarios. Again, that is all we're going to get here in this match, so gonna have to settle for this. We do have our 2 gold cultists we can use to activate those scenarios, so that's good stuff. The question is, will they play in this round? And they will, and of course use that Lippy. As I was saying, that was very clearly going to be their strategy here. It is a very strong deck, yes, but we have slowed down their setup by getting rid of Cerus. So we're just gonna spam our scenarios here. It's going to take us a little while to translate those into a lot of points because, of course, we need to activate the chapters of those scenarios. But the Seagull is not worth that much, and we could even put an infusion on that. And unlike in the first match where we were concerned about running out of board space because we had so many scenarios and so many cultists we were trying to get, this time around, in a shorter round with just 3 scenarios, that's not as much of a concern. Granted, they purify the infusion on that Seagull, but we'll perhaps go after it once again here with our other cultists. And the other good thing is that we don't actually need to play both of our gold cultists here. We just need to play one to trigger that first chapter of the scenarios, because that gives us the infusion on all of our cultists, and that is the key. That gives us the carryover, the boost, in round 3. Whereas the second chapter just gives us additional bronze cultists, which is not really necessary here, because sure, they'll get that extra Peller spawned in, but we've already passed them, so don't need to play that last cultist. And we draw into several cultists here, so that is ideal in this round, because we're just going to play those and get some big point slams out of them, and that's, yeah, even more cultists, so that's perfect. We do need to play Prophet first here, though, otherwise his Adrenaline is going to kick in. So we need to do that so we can still lock one of the units in their hand, and it's going to be a skirmisher, okay? I mean, that's not a huge deal. We did do a lot to disrupt their setup here in round 3, so I think they're less likely to get those cards they were trying to recycle. They do still have Doragary, though, so that will lock one of our cultists and reduce the amount we can boost everybody. But, of course, the more cultists we play, the more boost we get. And they do still have a Shield Maiden, though, so they'll use Lead Ability Charge to summon out the other ones. Again, that was the key thing. By getting rid of Ceres, we decrease the number of those copies they could create. And with our last cultist, we will catch them and take the win, even against a strong Lippy deck. Alright, so going up against monsters here, and they'll go first. And of course, we have all of our best cards in our hand here, but we'll mulligan out Vilgefortz and get him with our Oneiromancy. And they'll start with Ardgeth. Okay, I mean, that will deal damage to our Imperial Practitioners, but we'll still make them here. They'll go Mata, okay. Which actually gives us a cultist, which is a very good deal for us. And then we just play our other practitioners here as well. Then to decoy on Mata, okay. The Bruiser will damage that practitioner, and it's going to drop down to 1. Fortunately, no more frost in that row, and we'll put another practitioner there as well. So hopefully that can still hold on for a little bit longer here. And here's Kelly. Okay, because I was a little surprised by all the Wild Hunt and Frost stuff, but they are a Carapace deck, so that makes a lot more sense to see Kelly. And unfortunately, it does get rid of that weaker practitioner, but then again, we can put those Duchess's Informants on their side of the board, giving them low-value units, and that is not something that Kelly wants to see, so we might be able to disrupt them a little bit by doing that. And they get Mata back with their Stratagem. This time, okay, that's not as helpful of a card for us to draw into. But we have the same number of units here, so that's not a big deal for us, and we'll give them a unit. In fact, we will basically every turn from here on out, so that, again, should make it much more difficult for them to execute with Kelly here. Eredin, which, I mean, they certainly have dominance. Okay, but now we go with another Duchess's Informants, and I think that backfired on them on the previous turn, right? Didn't they have Kelly destroy one of their own cards? So, you love to see that. I mean, if they were to destroy one of our cards, at this point it would be Operator, and that's no big deal. Now it's Bloody Mistress. I mean, they probably have Sabbath, but that's going to just give them even more units on their side, and that's not something they want to do, because, yeah, they destroy one of those Gurnikori fruits, so that works for us. We'll steal this Practitioner, and then we'll go with Oneiro to get ourselves Vilgefortz out here. So that with him, we can steal, I mean, I guess we could take another Informant. Why not? And put the scenario in their graveyard. Then, of course, every time we click on a Practitioner, that means we'll get one of those scenarios at the top of our deck. So that's, what, 4, 5, 6, which actually, Might even be a little bit overkill at this point, but we'll take it. Triss Meteor Shower, now that's going to be worth a lot of points. They go, oh, the damaging route. Thought they were going to boost. I mean, I guess they have a lot of 1-power informants and whatnot in that melee row, so okay, fair enough. We'll play another informant, though, and this time, I guess we'll go with a bruiser. I mean, we can move Kelly out of their melee row, although actually, tell you what, they might have still had more units than us, so we might have wanted to have kept Kelly there. Well, either way, they're going to use Nivlin to move it back in. So, is it going to destroy one of their cards? Yeah, it is. It's an informant, so that's not a huge deal, but I think we pass here because we don't have anything all that valuable left anymore, and I don't even think that battle preparation would be enough for us to catch them. So we draw into those scenarios. We'll get rid of that battle preparation, and we still have Oneiro, which we can use to either get another one or one of our bronze cultists, although we drew into one of those courtesy of one of their Matas. They start with Ardgath. So I'm not entirely sure how aggressively they're trying to push here. I imagine they're going to use Witch's Sabbath to get Kelly back out, but are they saving that for round 3? That I'm not sure. You're going to use Dorgary to lock. I think we have to start breaking out our scenarios now, though. And tell you what, I mean, technically speaking, should have just gone straight into the scenario from our hand and saved that Oneiro in case we could have used that in a later round for something other than a scenario, like one of the bronze cultists. There is the Witch's Sabbath. So it does mean another Kelly. Cora switches back, and well, we'll just start spamming the scenarios now. It's now leader ability for them. Probably gets them close to, now they're certainly at Sabbath. So she'll turn back into Cora and start generating points every turn. Spontaneous Evolution. Not worth much, but it does mean they don't give themselves any more units. So I think we're still just going scenario here. Then they'll go Strays, which is not really going to change much for them. I mean, it does proc Thrive, I suppose, but there goes one of those Cora's fruits, because again, they have more units than we do right now. Now there's scenario, and then of course next turn, we will activate those scenarios, at least the first chapter of them, by playing one of our bronze cultists. Rather, by playing one of our gold cultists. That's an Igni, and I don't think we're at the threshold for that to work yet, so that's basically just a throwaway. We destroy the Cora's fruits with their Kelly, and that gives us copies of it. Now we use Master Ceremonies, trigger the first chapter of all the scenarios, and infuse everyone with all the boosts whenever we play a cultist. And we have a slim lead here, but once we lose that card, it's actually not enough, so we're going to have to play the Prophet as well. But when we do that, it's going to give us a lot of boosts. They're going to give us all these Deacons as well, so we are definitely going to win this round, and then we will have the infusions on our existing cultists that are still in our deck that can give us some carryover going into round 3, and I don't know if they have a way to get Kelly back either, because she is doomed right now, so yeah, they were all in on this round, and we still beat them, so they will forfeit. So there's a look at the Nilfgaard Cultist deck for the new Order in All Things seasonal event. If you liked the video, then make sure to hit the like and subscribe button, and leave a comment down below to let me know which other cards, archetypes, and factions you'd like us to experiment with next. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you next time.